Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spent time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla while she explores the memorable Czech capital of Prague. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla woke to church bells and the soft May morning light filtering through the lace curtains of her hotel room in Prague's old town. Spring in the Czech capital meant the city at its most beautiful, chestnut trees in full bloom, outdoor cafes opening for the season, the Vltava River reflecting blue skies, and everywhere, the sense of winter's heaviness lifted, the city emerging into warmth and light and possibility. She dressed in comfortable layers suitable for a long day of walking and exploring, knowing that Prague revealed itself best on foot, that its cobblestone streets and hidden courtyards, its bridges and staircases demanded slow discovery rather than hurried tourism. After a quick breakfast of rolls and coffee in the hotel's breakfast room, she set out into the morning, ready to experience the city that was often called the most beautiful in Europe, the city of 100 Spires. Her hotel was perfectly positioned in the Old Town, and she walked toward Old Town Square through narrow medieval streets that wound between tall buildings painted in soft colors. Cream and pale yellow, peach and dusty rose, their facades showing centuries of history, Romanesque foundations visible beneath Gothic modifications, Baroque additions layered over Renaissance structures, the whole creating an arc. The streets were already busy with morning activity, shop owners opening their doors, cafes arranging outdoor seating, street musicians setting up in strategic corners, tourists and locals mixing in that particular Prague blend, where centuries of being a crossroads city had created a cosmopolitan atmosphere even in medieval surroundings. She emerged onto Old Town Square and even expecting it, the beauty was striking. The space was vast and graceful, surrounded by buildings of different eras and styles, all harmonizing through some architectural alchemy. Gothic church spires, Baroque palaces, Renaissance arcades, even Art Nouveau details, all of it working together to create a whole that was greater than its parts. The square's centerpiece was the old town hall with its famous astronomical clock, already drawing a crowd even though it was early. The clock was a marvel of medieval engineering and artistry, multiple dials showing different astronomical information, figures of apostles that appeared on the hour, allegorical statues representing vanity and greed and death. The whole thing both functional timekeeper and philosophical statement about human existence and cosmic order. She watched while the hour approached, the crowd gathered, cameras ready. The clock mechanism began its performance. Bells rang. The apostles appeared in their windows, moving in their mechanical dance. Death pulled his bell rope. The Turk shook his head. The miser shook his money bag. The whole medieval pageant playing out the way it had for 6 centuries, drawing both laughs and wonder from the assembled crowd. After the clock's performance, she walked around the square slowly, appreciating the different buildings. The teen church, with its twin Gothic spires reaching toward heaven like black stone flames, the Baroque Starší Nicholas Church, the colorful facades of merchant houses, each one telling stories of Prague's mercantile and artistic heritage. A street musician was playing classical guitar near the teen church, his case open, his playing skilled and emotional. Czech composers mixed with Bach and Spanish pieces, the music floating across the square, adding to the morning's beauty. She stopped to listen for a few minutes, dropping coins in his case, the musician nodding thanks without pausing his playing. From the old town square she followed Karlova Street, the traditional route connecting the square to Charles Bridge, a narrow winding street that had been the royal way, the path Czech kings had taken for their coronations. Walking from the old town to Prague Castle, the symbolism of movement from merchant city to royal fortress marking the transition of power. Karlova Street was touristy now, lined with souvenir shops and cafes, but still charming, still following its medieval path, winding and turning in ways that reflected organic growth rather than planned design, each curve revealing new views, new shops, the street itself a journey rather than just a passage. It led inevitably to Charles Bridge, and while she approached, the bridge appeared through a stone gateway, its Gothic tower marking the entrance, and beyond it, the bridge itself stretching across the Vltava, statues lining both sides, Prague Castle visible on the hill beyond, the whole vista so perfect it seemed almost constructed for postcards, though it had simply evolved this way over centuries. She walked onto the bridge, joining the flow of pedestrians, tourists with cameras, artists selling paintings, musicians performing, locals crossing on their daily business. Everyone using this ancient bridge that had connected the two sides of Prague for over 600 years, surviving floods and wars, Swedish armies and Nazi occupation, communist repression and the Velvet Revolution, enduring and essential. The statues along the bridge were copies now, the originals preserved in museums, but they maintained their presence, saints and martyrs, biblical scenes and Czech heroes, 30 statues in all, each one positioned deliberately, each one with its story and significance, the most famous being Starší John of Nepomuk, patron saint of bridges, his statue rubbed smooth by centuries of hands touching it for luck. She walked slowly across the bridge, stopping at intervals to look at the river below, at the swans gliding past, at the tourboats moving upstream and down, at the water reflecting the morning sky and the buildings lining both banks. The Vltava serving like a mirror and highway, lifeline and boundary, essential to Prague's character and history. From the bridge, she could see Prague Castle on its hill, and she decided to climb up immediately, to visit while she was fresh, knowing the steep walk would be easier now than later in the day. She left the bridge on the Malá Strana side, the lesser town, and began the climb. The route up was steep but not impossible, following old streets that switch backed up the hillside, offering constantly changing views back over the river and the old town. Each turn revealing more of Prague's geography, the way the city was built in layers on hills and along the river, the topography essential to understanding its development and character. She passed through gardens and quiet residential streets, past embassies housed in Baroque palaces, their flags marking different nations, the diplomatic quarter peaceful and elegant, removed from the tourist intensity below. The climb took about 20 minutes, and at the top she reached the castle complex, entering through one of the gates where guards in formal blue uniforms stood watch, ceremonial but still official, maintaining tradition. Prague Castle wasn't a single building but a complex of palaces, churches, towers and courtyards. The largest castle complex in the world, the seat of Czech kings and emperors, presidents and power for over 1,000 years. She purchased a ticket that included the main sites and began exploring. Starší Vitus Cathedral dominated the first courtyard, its Gothic spires and flying buttresses dramatic against the blue May sky, the building taking 6 centuries to complete, each era adding its contribution while maintaining the Gothic vision. The facade was blackened with age and pollution, but restoration work was ongoing, parts of it showing original pale stone, the contrast striking. She entered the cathedral, where the interior was vast and soaring, columns rising toward vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows filtering colored light, the space designed to inspire awe and devotion, to make the human small before God and monarchy, the architectural message clear and powerful. The Art Nouveau stained glass by Alphonse Mucha caught her attention, different from the Gothic windows, more modern in sensibility, but maintaining the tradition of using light to create spiritual atmosphere. The colors were brilliant, blues and golds, greens and reds, creating patterns and images that transformed while the sun moved across the sky. She walked slowly around the cathedral, finding the tomb of Starší Wenceslas, patron saint of Bohemia, his chapel glowing with semi-precious stones set into the walls, gold and color creating a jewel box effect, a space of particular sanctity within the already sacred building. From the cathedral, she visited the old royal palace, entering the Vladislav Hall, an enormous Gothic chamber with ribbed vaulting that seemed to defy gravity, the ceiling creating patterns of stone and light, the space having hosted coronation feasts and jousting tournaments, markets and elections, the heart of Czech political and ceremonial life for centuries. The hall was empty of furniture now, just vast space and stone and light, but standing in it she could imagine it full, could sense the centuries of ceremony and power, the weight of history present in the stones and the soaring ceiling. After the palace she walked to Golden Lane, a tiny street tucked against the castle walls, lined with small colorful houses that had once housed castle guards and goldsmiths, artisans and alchemists, the buildings, now converted to shops and exhibits but still charming, still evoking the centuries when the castle was a self-contained world, city within city. The houses were painted in bright colors, blue and pink, yellow and green, each one barely wider than a single room, creating an almost fairy tale atmosphere, the scale intimate after the grand spaces of the cathedral and palace, showing how different levels of society had coexisted within the castle walls. After thoroughly exploring the castle complex, spending nearly 3 hours among its treasures, she descended back down to Malá Strana, taking a different route, following stairs and steep streets that offered new views, new angles on the city below. The descent was easier than the climb, gravity assisting, and she emerged onto the streets of Malá Strana, the lesser town that was actually noble and grand, full of Baroque palaces and elegant churches, gardens and squares. She was ready for lunch and she found a traditional Czech restaurant on a quiet side street, its entrance marked by a painted sign showing a medieval merchant, its interior dark and cozy, wood-paneled and traditional, the kind of place locals used, where Czech food was prepared properly, without tourist modifications. A waiter appeared, an older man with a formal manner softened by genuine friendliness. "Good afternoon, do you have a reservation?" "No, but I'm looking for a table for one," Lyla said. "Of course, please come with me." He led her to a small table by the window and brought a menu. May I recommend today's special, svíčková? It's very good. Yes, please. And a beer? Which beer would you like? We have Pilsner, Urquell, Budvar. Pilsner, please. Excellent choice. The beer arrived first, golden and perfectly poured, the foam thick and creamy, the taste bitter and clean, exactly what Czech beer should be. She drank it slowly, feeling the days walking in her legs, the climb to the castle having been substantial, and the cool beer was restorative and delicious. The svíčková arrived, beef sirloin in cream sauce with cranberries, served with bread dumplings, a classic Czech dish that was comfort food elevated to art. The beef was tender, the sauce rich and slightly sweet from the cranberries, the dumplings soaking up the sauce perfectly, the whole combination hearty and satisfying, exactly right for a cool May day after hours of walking. After lunch, properly fortified, she walked to Starší Nicholas Church in Malá Strana. Different from the church of the same name in Old Town Square, this one a Baroque masterpiece, its interior overwhelming in its decoration. Ceiling frescoes and gilded details, marble columns and dramatic sculptures, light streaming through windows to illuminate the golden surfaces, creating an atmosphere of theatrical religiosity that was distinctly Baroque, meant to inspire through beauty and overwhelming sensory richness. She sat in a pew for a while, letting the space work its effect, the interplay of architecture and art, light and decoration, creating something that was both sacred space and artistic statement, both church and gallery, the boundaries between worship and aesthetics deliberately blurred in the Baroque manner. From the church, she walked to Kampa Island, a small island in the Vltava, separated from Malá Strana by a narrow channel called the Devil's Stream, accessible by bridges and creating a peaceful park-like space in the heart of the city. The island was charming and quiet, with gardens and old mills, paths along the water, benches for sitting and watching the river flow past. She found a spot on the grass and lay down, looking up at the sky through the branches of trees just coming into full leaf, the May green bright and fresh, and she must have dozed slightly, because when she opened her eyes the light had shifted, the afternoon progressing, and she felt refreshed, the brief rest having renewed her energy. She walked across Legion Bridge, one of the bridges connecting to the new town, its name commemorating Czech legions who fought in World War I, and made her way to Wenceslas Square, a long wide space lined with shops and hotels, cafes and offices, its scale different from Old Town Square, more 1920 where Czechs had gathered to demand freedom, where history had turned peacefully, remarkably, the square forever associated with that moment of transformation. At the top of the square stood the National Museum, its neo-Renaissance building imposing and grand, currently under renovation, scaffolding covering parts of it, but still maintaining its presence, its position anchoring the square, giving it visual termination and symbolic weight. She walked the length of Wenceslas Square, observing its energy, so different from the medieval areas, busier, more international, more commercial, but still distinctly Prague, still part of the city's complex identity, showing how different eras and purposes layered into a coherent whole. As the afternoon moved toward evening, she decided to make her way to Letná Park for sunset, knowing it offered some of Prague's best views, positioned on a plateau above the Vltava, overlooking the bridges and the old town, perfect for watching the day end. She took a taxi. The walk would have been possible but would have taken significant time, and she wanted to arrive before sunset, and the driver navigated through the city efficiently, crossing the river and climbing to the park, dropping her at the entrance. Letná Park was spacious and popular. Locals using it for jogging and walking, families with children, couples strolling, everyone enjoying the May evening. She walked to the famous beer garden at the park's edge, but rather than stopping there, she continued to the viewpoint, where the panorama opened up dramatically. Below, the Vltava wound through the city, its bridges like necklaces strung across the water, Charles Bridge distinctive with its statues. The other bridges more modern but still beautiful, all of them connecting the two sides of Prague, stitching the city together. The old town spread across the far bank, its rooftops creating a pattern of red tiles, its spires rising at intervals. The city of 100 spires indeed, each one marking a church or tower, each one part of Prague's distinctive skyline. Prague Castle was visible on its hill, Starší Vitus Cathedral dominant, and she could trace her day's journey, the old town square, the route to Charles Bridge, the climb to the castle, the descent to Malá Strana, all of it visible from here, the geography making sense, the topography explaining the city's development and character. Other people gathered for sunset, everyone positioning themselves for the best views, and a companionable silence settled over the viewpoint, everyone waiting for the light to change, for the sky to begin its evening performance. The sun was lowering, approaching the horizon beyond the city, and the light was already beginning its transformation, becoming warmer, richer, painting the buildings in gold and amber, the red roofs glowing, the river catching the light and reflecting it back. Doubled beauty. An older couple stood near her, and the woman turned, smiling. Beautiful, isn't it? We come here often, we live in Prague, but we never tire of this view. It's spectacular, Lyla agreed. I can see why you'd return. Prague reveals itself slowly, the man said. Each visit, each season, you see something new. But this view, this light, it never changes and it's always different. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Lyla said. They stood together in friendly silence while the sun continued its descent, the colors intensifying, deep oranges and pinks, purples appearing in the higher sky, the clouds catching fire, the whole city bathed in golden light, every detail sharp and beautiful, the spires and bridges, rooftops and river, all of it glowing. The sun touched the horizon and slipped below, the colors reaching their peak and then beginning to fade, softening to pastels, the light becoming gentler, the day ending gracefully. The city's lights began to come on, street lights and building lights, the castle illuminated dramatically, the bridges lit, creating a different kind of beauty, urban and electric but still romantic, still Prague. As twilight settled, she made her way back down from the park, taking a taxi to her final destination, a jazz club in the old town, a basement venue she'd read about, known for intimate atmosphere and excellent music, where both local and international musicians performed, where the focus was purely on music without pretension or commercial pressure. She found the club down a narrow street, its entrance marked by a small sign, descending steps into a brick vaulted cellar that felt medieval and intimate, low ceilings and dim lighting, small tables scattered around a tiny stage, the whole space holding maybe 50 people, creating an atmosphere where audience and musicians shared the experience rather than being separated by performance distance. She found a seat at a small table near the back. ordered a glass of wine and settled in while the musicians prepared to play. The ensemble was a quartet, piano, bass, drums, and saxophone, and they began without announcement, diving into a standard, the familiar melody, transformed by their interpretation, personal and immediate. The music filled the small space, and Lyla felt herself relaxing into it, the saxophone's warm tone carrying the melody, the piano providing harmonic foundation and occasional solos, the bass and drums creating the rhythmic bed that held everything together. The musicians were skilled and empathetic, listening to each other, responding, creating conversation through their instruments. The music washed over her, and she felt the day settling, all the walking and seeing, the beauty and history, the churches and palaces, bridges and squares, all of it becoming memory, becoming part of her internal landscape, Prague imprinting itself, through images and sensations, through the taste of beer and dumplings, the sound of church bells and jazz, the sight of sunset over the city of spires. The quartet moved through their set, mixing standards with original compositions, faster numbers with slower ballads, creating dynamics and variation while maintaining the essential jazz spirit. Improvisation and interaction, tradition and innovation, structure and freedom all coexisting, all necessary. She ordered another glass of wine and let herself float on the music, not analyzing or thinking, just receiving, letting the notes and rhythms carry her, the saxophone singing, the piano dancing, the bass walking, the drums brushing and punctuating, all of it creating something larger than the sum of its parts, jazz's essential magic, individual voices creating collective beauty. Other people in the club were similarly absorbed, some with eyes closed, some watching the musicians intently, some with hands moving unconsciously to the rhythm, everyone connected through the music, strangers united by sound and groove, by the shared experience of live performance in an intimate space. The set ended with a slow blues, the saxophonist playing with particular emotion, bending notes, creating vocal effects, telling a story without words, and when the final note died away, the silence lasted a moment before applause broke out, genuine and warm appreciation for what had been created and shared. The musicians took a short break, and Lyla remained in her seat, finishing her wine, feeling happy and calm, grateful for this day, for Prague's generosity in revealing itself, for the music that provided perfect ending, allowing the day to fade naturally, to resolve like a well-constructed composition, everything finding its place, everything contributing to the whole. The quartet returned for another set and she stayed, floating away on the music, letting the saxophone and piano carry her, the bass and drums supporting and propelling, the wine and the dim light and the ancient cellar and the modern music all combining to create an experience that was quintessentially Prague. History and art, tradition and innovation, beauty and soul, European sophistication and Czech heart. When the music finally ended and the club began to close, she walked back to her hotel through streets now mostly quiet, the late hour meaning most tourists had retreated, the city settling into its night rhythm, locals heading home, restaurants closing, Prague returning to itself, after the day's performance for visitors. At her hotel she climbed the stairs to her room, tired in the best way, feet sore from walking but spirit lifted, mind full of images and sounds, tastes and sensations. She stood at her window looking out at the old town, its rooftops and spires silhouetted against the night sky, the glow of streetlights creating pools of warm light, the city peaceful and beautiful. She thought about her day's journey, the morning in Old Town Square watching the astronomical clock, the walk across Charles Bridge with its statues, the climb to Prague Castle and the treasures within Starší Vitus Cathedral's soaring spaces, Vladislav Hall's Gothic vaulting, Golden Lane's tiny houses, the descent to Malá Strana for lunch, the baroque splendor of Starší Nicholas Church, the peaceful respite on Kampa Island. The afternoon walk through Wenceslas Square showing Prague's modern face, the taxi ride to Letná Park for spectacular sunset views over the city of spires, and finally, the perfect ending at the jazz club, music in a medieval cellar, tradition and innovation, history and art all converging. Prague in May had been ideal, the weather perfect for walking, the chestnut trees blooming, outdoor life flourishing, the city at its most welcoming and beautiful, winter forgotten, summer not yet arrived, that sweet spot of spring when everything felt possible and new. The city of 100 spires had lived up to its reputation, had offered its beauty generously, had revealed its layers of history and culture, had welcomed her into its spaces and rhythms, had created a day that balanced activity and rest, discovery and reflection, visual beauty and musical soul, all of it distinctly Prague, all of it memorable and meaningful. She remained at the window a while longer, not quite ready to end the day, the jazz still playing in her mind, the saxophone's voice carrying her, the river flowing below, the spires rising into darkness, the ancient city continuing its eternal rhythms,